Welcome to what I think is going to be called the Coastal Performance Nutrition Podcast. So I officially conjured up the idea for this podcast on Tuesday when I delivered a group coaching call to some other coaches on programming and the art of coaching. I told myself I was going to start it in the new year, but then I caught myself a little bit, and I've been telling all of my clients or just in my content in general, I've been talking a lot about you shouldn't wait until the new year to start your goals because it didn't work last year and it didn't work the year before. So I sort of ate my own words and I had an hour or two to spare today. So here I am, starting the podcast. This will be episode number 1. I don't even know where this podcast is going to head in the long term. I just know that I have valuable things to say. I'm confident enough to say that. I have a lot of things to say. Sometimes I think too many things to say that I end up going on random tangents, which is what this podcast is going to be. Probably a lot of random tangents, not that much scripting or topics written down. Just going to be me talking about things that I'm passionate about, which for the most part is training, nutrition, mindset. That's pretty much it. So a lot of the interactions I have with clients or the content that I produce, it's very short form, 5 to 10 minutes. And sometimes I have to cut myself off to make sure I'm not blabbering on for too long. So this podcast is essentially going to be the longer form version of all the other content that I mainly share on Instagram. And I think for the most part, it will be a lot of solo episodes and me just going on big tangents, talking about topics that excite me or frustrate me, especially things that frustrate me when it comes to the absolute shit show that is social media, nutrition, and training content. But I think I also am going to get some guests on this podcast as well. I know a lot of cool people who have a lot of valuable things to say, not even just from a nutrition and training perspective, but from a life perspective, a mindset perspective. I know a lot of cool people. So I think 1 episode a week is probably what you can expect. I dare say the first couple are probably just going to be me doing solo episodes whilst I work out guest schedules and actually message people and tee up a time and date to film the podcast. As you can see, it's not going to be anything fancy, no fancy recording equipment. I'm just using a Rode microphone that's plugged into the back of my iMac. No fancy camera equipment. I'm just doing it. I'll work it out along the way, and if I can afford some fancier equipment to upgrade my setup, I will do so. But for the time being, I'm in my office, no aircon, it's hot as shit in here, and I'm just going to talk. So I wrote some notes down, but the only notes I wrote down was what this is, who I am, general nutrition, performance nutrition, specifically for women, and programming, because they're the main things that this podcast is going to be about. So I've obviously already rambled on a little bit about what this podcast is, but to further elaborate on that, most of the time I'm probably going to be speaking about general nutrition, so nutrition fundamentals, the basics of nutrition, and performance nutrition, specifically for women, because that is somewhat of the niche that I have found myself moving towards, just because I have been able to make the biggest impact within that specific population of people. And I'm passionate about that specific population of people, helping women do really cool things with their training. They can only do that if they have the nutrition to support the really cool training goals that they have. So that is a big passion of mine. And that's the stuff that fills up my cup the most and lights me up inside, I guess you could say. I will also probably be talking about programming as well. My personal training history is mainly in the strength side of things. So best gym lifts, 267 kilo deadlift. At the time, it was 3 times my body weight. It was with straps. For you powerlifters out there who don't count that, I don't care. It felt fucking great. Best bench press, 137.5 kilos, and best squat, 175 kilos. So my deadlift shits on every other one of my lifts. But that's what I just enjoyed. There was a period of my training where when I first started training at the Hybrid HQ, which is where I train now, I was deadlifting every day. And I've done multiple segments of training where I've deadlifted every day and just worked up to a max deadlift. And anytime I tell people about that, they assume that I would have blown my back in half, but surprisingly, it's just turned my back into a resilient back. And part of the programming and training conversation on this podcast will be related to that somewhat loosely, as far as the body is not fragile. The body is not something where you lift a weight and it just snaps in half. Our body is very adaptable. Our body is this amazing thing that when we apply a measured dose of training to it, it adapts. So it barely matters what we do to our body. If we expose it to things gradually over time, it will adapt to handle those things. So I'm not going to go on a ramble about that right now, because I could speak about that from a place of frustration for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to save you there. But that's what this podcast is mainly going to be about. But I will also be touching on the mindset side of things when it comes to your training, your nutrition, and just life in general. I think there's a lot of things, doing big things in your training in particular. I think there's a lot of mindset benefits that comes with that. A lot of things that you learn from a resiliency standpoint, a consistency standpoint, and you learn a lot of transferable skills. So training itself and the consistency and motivation involved with chasing big goals in the gym does give rise to a lot of general transferable skills that I think have helped me do well in business in particular. So I'll be talking about that a little bit as well. So yeah, and then I think a lot of the guests that I have on will be around those topics as well. But I do have a lot of guests in mind who will just have cool life perspectives to offer, who have been through some shit and have some cool perspectives to offer you. So to recap, the podcast will mostly be touching on general nutrition and performance nutrition. It'll be touching on programming as well for your training, both lifting and running as well. And then the mindset and just life perspectives as well. Honestly, I'm not going to confine this to anything at all. It is going to be a lot of different topics of shit that I just enjoy. I want this to be a passion project of mine. I don't want it to feel like an extra layer of work. I just want it to be something fun, which is why I'm starting it in the first place. So the things that I talk about are all going to be things that I find fun or that I find interesting, so that I can actually deliver things passionately and not just sit here as a mute behind the computer. So in saying that though, if there's topics that someone wants me to cover, or if I get questions or requests to cover certain topics on a longer form, I'm happy to do that. But as long as it's something I'm A, knowledgeable about, B, passionate about, or C, excited about. If it doesn't fit those categories, I probably just won't do it, because like I said, this is going to be a passion project of mine, and something that I hope to fill up my cup during a busy work week. So the other note over the side, who I am. I'm going to do a TLDR, too long didn't read version of who I am. So got my PT cert back in 2017, did 3 years at university studying a bachelor's of biomedical science. In my last year, I set my eyes, to rewind, as soon as I left school, I wanted to be a doctor. I didn't get the marks required to be a doctor, so I pursued a bachelor's in biomedical science. In the third year of the Bachelor's of Biomedical Science, I spent way too much time, more than I care to admit, studying for the UCAT exam, which was essentially the entry exam for medical school. I managed to get accepted to the interview stage for medical school, got accepted to medical school after passing the interviews. In 2020 or 2021, I can't exactly remember which year, I did my first year of medical school, and all I wanted was to be the best doctor ever. I did really well in my first year, finished pretty much towards the top of my class, and then I took a gap year and dropped out. So to pursue, quite truly, nutrition. In the gap year that I took, I pursued nutrition a nutrition study with the Sports Nutrition Association Australia. I did my certificate in applied sports nutrition, pardon me, and I'm now furthering my study with the Sports Nutrition Association, doing my diploma of sports nutrition. So, but yes, to sort of cut that down even further, finished high school, studied a Bachelor's of Biomedical Science, got into medical school, took a gap year or dropped out after 1 year to further pursue my education in the nutrition space. And then here we are about 3 or 4 years later with a fully established online coaching business in the nutrition and training space. I also work face-to-face as a coach at the Hybrid HQ, the best gym on the Central Coast, with the best coaching team ever, just the best team in the world, and a bunch of amazing members. So to fast forward to where I am now, I am an online coach, more so specializing in the nutrition side of things, and I'm a face-to-face coach at the Hybrid HQ as well. So that sort of wraps up my professional career, I guess you could say. Believe it or not, a lot of people think I am like 35. I have had people ask me how old I am. I deliver 35 with a straight face and they believe me. I'm not 35, I'm 26. Soon to be 27 in January. I have a lovely wife. We've been married for just about 2 years now. We have a dog named Hank who is basically a human, and we live on the Central Coast. So that's just if somehow I get viewers on this who don't know me from a bar of soap, that's the quick synopsis. So I've gone over what this is: nutrition, performance nutrition, programming, mindset, lifestyle. I've gone over who I am. I'm an online coach and a face-to-face coach on the Central Coast, mainly specializing in the nutrition side of things. My history is in biomedical science, did a 3-year degree in that, did a year of medical school, took a gap year and eventually dropped out to further pursue nutrition study and lean into my coaching business, which leads me to where I am now, starting this podcast. So, some further background on, you're probably like, fucking hell, man, just hurry up, get to the point. But as I said, I honestly don't care how many views this video gets or how many views this podcast gets. I don't want to make money off this podcast. I don't want to do shit off this podcast. This is truly just a passion project of mine. Heads up, I do swear. I swear with my clients in my coaching. I swear all the time. If you don't like swearing, I'm sorry. That's who I am. And that's just how it is. If you don't like swearing, then if you are interested in coaching, I probably am not the coach for you. It does not come from a place of aggression. It comes from a place of passion. So what was I talking about? I've gone on a tangent and forgotten what I was talking about. I paused the video, tried to think of what I was just speaking about. I can't for the life of me remember what I was talking about. So I'm going to take that as my cue to, that's right, now I remember. So the reason this podcast started is I have a bit of a passion for my business or not for sharing content. I'm currently sharing about anywhere from 5 to 7 pieces of content per day on Instagram, and more on some other platforms, which I won't go into, but I just have a passion for education. I put up a post the other night on my Instagram talking about coastal performance nutrition in 2026 and things, the space within or where I see coastal performance nutrition going in 2026. I've already got a couple of seminars locked in, so I'm going to be doing a seminar series on nutrition fundamentals and performance nutrition, both in person and online as well. So a lot of the where the business is going in 2026 is going to be very education heavy. But to give you a synopsis here, if you haven't seen my post on Instagram, where I plan on going with business is expanding my one-to-one service, and most likely bringing on a second coach. Within my one-to-one service, I want to introduce an education portal or a client-only education portal to just increase the value and success within my coaching. And as I said, I want to bring on a second coach to try and add, not to try and replace me, but to try and add another set of eyes on the business. I think I don't want to bring on another coach who I have to train heaps. I want to bring on another coach who's going to be able to deliver a different perspective than me, so that it's a 1 + 1 = 3 effect. But I'm not going to dive into that too much. The other main things, I'm just going to pull up the post and talk about some of the other main things that I plan on doing for the business in the coming year. So the one-to-one coaching side of things, I've already spoken about that. Education. So the seminars, I've already spoken about those, but I want to do some private group coaching and education as well. So essentially taking on cohorts of 20 to 30 people and walking them through, we call it nutrition literacy. So just like we have literacy in primary schools where we segment the learning and walk people through their reading and writing skills, I want to do the same thing for nutrition. So start at the absolute bare bone basics. Assume I'm teaching a 5-year-old and then walk you to where you sort of need to be able to just function well from a nutrition standpoint in the real world. So I want to look at expanding into more of that. So private group coaching and education. And then Coastal Performance Nutrition YouTube channel. So obviously this is being uploaded to YouTube, but I do want to utilize this platform for not so much podcasts, but 10 to 20 minute videos going into one topic. Whereas I want the podcast to more so be solo episodes going into multiple topics for 60 to 90 minutes and be able to bring on guests as well. But I basically said Coastal Performance Nutrition YouTube channel and podcast. So the podcast sort of kills two birds with one stone, but I don't want to just tick a box for the sake of it. I do want to increase the amount of content I provide in a longer form. Hence why I'm doing the education portal for my one-to-one coaching clients and why I'm starting this podcast as well. The other goal, 2,000 pieces of content on Instagram. I have a goal of, my overarching goal is to leave 1 million people better than I found them. So touch the lives of 1 million people and leave them in a spot better than when I found them. How I track that, how I do that, I don't know. But a big piece of that is going to be the education side of things. And Instagram is a great platform for me to capture people so that I can show them more of these longer form videos where I can actually educate them and impact their lives from a nutrition, training, and mindset point of view. So next year you can expect, if you're following me on Instagram and that's how you found me, 2,000 pieces of content. So an average of 5 pieces of content per day. I did put a disclaimer. Yes, you'll see me every time you open your phone, and that's fine. If you don't want to see the content, you can unfollow me. That is fine. Then I want to finish my diploma of sports nutrition with the Sports Nutrition Association Australia. That's already underway in the planning stage, or the proposal stage, I should say. That's going to involve a lot more education on my part, but possibly some cool research opportunities as well. So I hope to dive into the women-specific performance nutrition when I get a chance to do some sort of research within my diploma. So soon to come. I'm also going to be working on a plug-and-play nutrition course for gyms. So this is going to tie very closely to the client education portal that I want to put together for my one-to-one coaching clients. I essentially want to develop a bunch of, or a fundamental and a performance nutrition course that I can give to gyms so that they can add extra value to their members as far as helping educate their members on what good nutrition looks like. That's just another aspect of my business that I'm going to work on whilst I do the podcast, do the upgrade my one-to-one coaching, the group coaching, the seminars, all that sort of stuff. But overarching goal for the year is do more. Do more. I think for myself right now, where I am, I fucking love my job. I hope all my clients will tell you this as well. I fucking love my job. I love having the opportunity to do what I do on a daily basis. And I'm very lucky that I have a very supportive wife who is understanding of that and is okay with me working stupid hours some weeks. Some days, some weeks, some months, stupid hours. But it doesn't come from a place of need or trying to escape from anything. It truly just comes from a place of passion. I love what I do. I love helping people and talking to people about what I feel like I can offer from a coaching standpoint. So yeah, this year, do more for myself and for others. So the overarching goal though is to leave 1 million people in a better spot than I found them. Again, how I track that, how I measure that, how I do that, I don't know, but a lot of it comes from education, more eyeballs, trying to cut through the bullshit as much as I can and help give people. I think the biggest thing I want to do with this longer form content is I'm going to write myself a note in case I forget this train of thought. But essentially, I want to make the complex simple. What I see a lot these days is coaches saying these like really fancy words and topics, like these really complex things. They're trying to make themselves sound and look really smart. But the reason they have to explain things so complex and use all these smart words is because they don't understand it enough to deliver it in a simple way. Because if you truly understand a topic, you should be able to take the complex parts of that topic and deliver them simply. So take complex stuff and explain it simply. So that's what I hope to try and do with this podcast, is cut through all the noise, all the bullshit, and just explain things on a very fundamental level. So I'm just going to go through, I guess, my thoughts around some things when it comes to general nutrition, performance nutrition, programming, and tie it back essentially to the complex made simple. So taking complex topics that may not be easily understood, but putting them in a simple to explain manner. So in the end, that's what I hope this podcast is. It's a way for me to express some of my knowledge and express the knowledge of other really smart people who I choose to bring on, but always making sure that we start at explaining it to a 5-year-old. And now that I think of it, I'm going to write myself a note. I'm going to make sure that this podcast always starts, no matter what topic, trying to break it down and explain it to a 5-year-old. So I'm going to probably go for, I don't know, another 15, 20 minutes. Again, I'm not going to put pressure on myself to keep this to a certain length. We're already at 22 minutes, which is stupid. But first of all, general nutrition. So nutrition fundamentals. I love and hate social media. I love it because it gives people like myself a chance to share what I think, could be biased, is good, simple advice. I also hate social media because shit advice spreads way faster than good advice. Because shit advice usually sounds really fancy, really new, really exciting, and it spreads so fast. It spreads in half a second and it takes 2 years. It spreads really fast and it takes 2 years just to debunk it and try and bring the general population back to the understanding where they need to be. So from a general nutrition standpoint, I'm going to be focusing a lot on the shit that matters, because the state of the industry right now is we are focusing on all of the wrong things. We are at the point where, especially, I'm quite grateful we're not in America because it seems worse over there. But the state of the industry that we're in is we're trying to get people to focus on avoiding food dyes and making sure they're consuming the right sweeteners and making sure that they're consuming all organic and making sure that they're consuming the right type of oils and all this shit that really is so low on the priority list. We're not even eating enough fruit and vegetables. Like, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think the stats are like, if we look at the amount of people eating 5 serves of veg and 2 serves of fruit a day, it's like 7% are doing that or something like that. It's ridiculous. So when we are sharing information on health, we're telling people to pick food based on the type of food dye or the type of sweetener, and yet people aren't eating enough fruit and vegetables. We're literally at the point where there's segments of social media that tell you vegetables are bad or oats are bad or Like, we are at an absolutely dire place when it comes to the state of nutrition advice that's given online. And the issue is, the more crazy and fancy it sounds and the more complex words someone uses, you believe it more. But the issue is, those people who talk very complex and very smart words, they rarely understand the topics enough to be able to explain them simply. And a big thing that really pisses me off on social media, if you see advice or content that is very absolute and they are speaking in absolute, so saying this definitely, or this is the one cause, or, you know, everyone should do this, that's usually probably not true. A lot of questions when it comes to nutrition should be answered with, it depends. Because nutrition is all about context. A nutrition plan for you is going to look very different than a nutrition plan for me. Because every answer, it depends. Should you do more steps per day? I don't know. It depends. How many are you doing? So we can speak in sort of, give generalized advice, but I think a massive issue with the industry right now is just the state of the things that we're focusing on are so low on the totem pole, we're missing the forest for the trees. We're not doing the basics right. And even then, you get people saying, do the basics right, and then the basics are supposedly ice baths, $3,000 saunas, hydrogen therapy, bariatric oxygen tanks, or whatever. That's not the basics. I think so many people would be in a much better position with their nutrition if they followed the Australian food guidelines. That is not, for some reason, it's become this narrative that the government's trying to kill us and any nutrition information that the government gives us is shit and wrong. It's not bad. It's pretty good. Everyone's saying, I think this is more of a thing in America, but a lot of people say like, oh, the government, they always give shit information. The, healthy eating guidelines, they're to blame for a lot of our health issues. No one follows them. 7%, I could be wrong with that number, but if 7% of people eat enough fruit and vegetable, we cannot blame the guidelines that tell us what to eat and how much of things to eat. We can't blame those guidelines for our current health and nutrition issues if no one is following them. And that's where we're at. We have these healthy eating guidelines that no one follows. But we blame them, and we have all these people who are, I call, quite literally, quacks. They are quacks. They're predatory people online trying to sell you something. We have all these people telling you the government's wrong, everyone's wrong, I've got the secret. And that secret is this revolutionary diet that only I know about. Give me money, I will show you the secret. That's where we're at currently. So what I hope with this podcast is to give you general, fundamental level nutrition advice to help you improve your nutrition and focus on the things that actually matter. Because if I think of it from let's just say a fat loss standpoint, if I look on social media for fat loss advice, the most popular topics and the videos that go the most viral is managing your insulin, managing your hormones, trying to nail your meal timing, don't spike your blood sugar in the morning, eat apple cider vinegar, all this shit that really, it's the 5%. I think, and what I want to try and do with this podcast is give the 95% of things that matter when it comes to performance nutrition and nutrition fundamentals. And when we're talking about fundamentals, I don't know why this is somehow a crazy thing to say these days, but when it comes to fat loss, yes, you do need a calorie deficit. We have gotten to the point where people have been convinced that calorie deficits don't work. A calorie deficit is not a diet. It is not the same as counting calories. A calorie deficit is quite literally when you consume less energy than you burn on a daily basis. And the amount of energy you burn is based on your basal metabolic rate, your non-exercise activity, the energy you burn in digestion, and the energy you burn doing exercise. That's how many calories you burn. If you consume less calories than you burn, you will lose weight. You will lose weight. We cannot create energy out of thin air, and we can't burn more energy than we consume and not lose weight. Because all of the tissue that we're storing on our body has energy. So the fundamentals, that's the sort of shit that really frustrates me, is you as the consumer, if we call it that, have been told that a calorie deficit doesn't work. My insulin control, blood sugar control, 90-day fasting, blah, 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 that works. But if we're talking about fat loss, every single diet works in the exact same way. The exact same way. It is physiologically impossible for you to lose fat if you're not in a calorie deficit. If you don't lose weight, if you don't lose fat, you are not in a calorie deficit. It's as simple as that. And just because it's that simple doesn't mean it's easy though. And I think that's where things get conflated, is people try a calorie deficit and they don't lose weight and they say, well, a calorie deficit didn't work. But that's not the truth. A calorie deficit is not a diet. A calorie deficit is the fundamental principle. And that's where I think we really need to do better in the way we communicate things, is understanding what's a principle and what's a method. So a principle, the thing that works, the reason why things work, is a calorie deficit. Fat loss diets work because they cause a calorie deficit, consuming less energy than you burn on a daily basis. All of these diets, all these fad diets, all these sustainable diets, all diets, they are a method. Fasting is a method. Keto is a method. Carnivore is a method. One meal a day is a method. They're all methods that, if they adhere to the principle of a calorie deficit, cause fat loss. So trying to understand what's a principle and what's a method. We can lose fat with any diet under the sun, as long as we're in a calorie deficit. So what we need to, or what I hope to try and help you understand, is not to get married to any particular nutrition approach. Nutrition, quite simply, is finding an approach that works for you as a unique individual. I do not have any of my clients on a diet. I structure their nutrition around their preferences and what they need. Not just from a nutrition standpoint, but from a lifestyle standpoint as well. From a mental standpoint, from a social standpoint. Because I think the biggest issue is we try and find the answer to fat loss or the answer to a healthy diet. And there is no the answer. Because there's no one person who is identical. Well, not everyone is identical to each other. So when you have different people, you have different answers. Just like when you have different maths problems, you have different answers, different solutions, different ways of working them out. And it's the same thing with individual people. When you have a unique life, the principles stay the same. So if we're talking fat loss, a calorie deficit, that's the principle for everyone to adhere to if they want to lose fat. But the method changes. And this is where we get confused, where people say, my neighbor down the road lost fat doing carnivore, so I'm going to do carnivore. But you're a 40-year-old woman with 3 children and a husband, and you work full time, versus that person being a 20-year-old personal trainer who works 10 hours a week. They can afford to eat all meat every day and cook meat all day, every day. That doesn't work for you. You don't have the same life situation. And that truly is what this is about. It's not trying to find the best way of eating, because it doesn't exist. It's trying to find the best way of eating for you to achieve your goals and achieve a state of health. And when we talk about health, we're not talking about you being shredded or you being fit or you achieving a certain physical goal. I'm talking about health, which is a blend of your physical health, your mental health, and your social health. We triangulate those three things, mental, physical, and social, and we try and find quote unquote balance between those things. That to me is what is health. Health is physical, mental, and social, and trying to land somewhere in the middle where we find a good balance between those things. Because we need physical health, we need social health, and we need mental health. We need all of those things. Nutrition is just part of that conversation. But unfortunately, what we've been led to believe is that physical health is the one thing that matters. And if you think that physical health is the only thing that matters, it can be easy to neglect your social health and your mental health as well. So that's what I'm going to try and talk through in this podcast. And the other big thing when it comes to nutrition fundamentals is it is so fucking hot in here. The biggest thing that I wish people would understand is that good nutrition is not about avoiding all of the bad things. It is about consuming enough of the good stuff. So if we keep focusing the communication on avoid food dyes, avoid sweeteners, avoid junk food, avoid, what the hell do we eat? If I scroll social media, I see 20 different people telling me to avoid all of these different things. What do I eat? Someone tells me bread is bad, so I don't eat bread. Someone tells me vegetables are bad, so I don't eat vegetables. Someone says red meat's bad, so I don't eat red meat. Then someone comes along and says, oh, fish is bad because it's got this in it, and so I don't eat fish. And then someone comes along and says, oh, seed oils are bad, so I don't eat any vegetable oils. And then someone comes along and says, oh, well, you shouldn't use any oil, so I don't have any oil or any healthy fats. There's just so much content focusing on what to avoid that we've forgotten that health is not about avoidance and being fearful of things. It's about consuming enough of the right stuff. And the right stuff is everything. I don't think there is, if we start to think binary and think good and bad, we put things into good and bad. Two categories, which is just not how nutrition works. It's a spectrum. There is extremely nutrient dense and nutrient devoid. Nutrient devoid, we're probably looking at pure table sugar. Really nutrient dense, we might be looking at things like beef liver, red meat, vegetables, that sort of stuff. It's a spectrum. And it's not just like all junk food is here and all whole foods are here. It's a spectrum where some quote unquote junk food may sit in the middle of the nutritional spectrum, where it's like actually got some really good nutrients in it, but just because it's put in a wrapper, there's people out there who say, hey, if it's in a packet, it's bad for you. But that's not the case. Good nutrition is about consuming enough nutrient-dense foods to achieve your nutritional targets. It's not about you feeling like you're better than everyone else because you don't eat junk food. Because you're not. If you are someone who eats all whole food and you eat no junk food, well done. Congratulations. Very commonly, that can become an eating disorder. There is an eating disorder on the rise called orthorexia, and it's where people develop a compulsive obsession with consuming healthy food and create a fear around unhealthy food. So the mental health plays a massive role in our nutrition as well, the way we view our nutrition. Being able to drink a beer and not be scared about all the bad shit happening inside you, that should be something that you want to be able to do. If you live your life in fear and thinking of all the things you're trying to avoid, you're missing the point. Good nutrition at a fundamental level is about you consuming enough of the right stuff to reach your nutrient needs. And truth be told, I say this all the time, you do not get bonus points for eating more nutrients than you need. There is a thing as too much. If you go and get a blood test for a specific vitamin or mineral, there is a range. You can have too much. And we saw that with the rise of the carnivore diet, everyone eating beef liver and getting vitamin A toxicity. Just because something's really nutrient dense doesn't mean that you should eat a shit ton of it, nor should it be the only thing you eat. We have targets that we ideally need to hit, and once we hit those, we can have an ice cream if we want to. What I like to say to all my clients and in a lot of my content is 80 to 90% of what we eat should be whole foods, nutrient dense whole foods from all food groups, avoiding no food groups unless we have a medical reason to do so. And that core structure of our diet, the 80 to 90% nutrient dense whole foods, ensures that we are hitting our nutrient targets from a macronutrient standpoint, protein, carbs, and fats, and a micronutrient standpoint. Okay? And then 10 to 20% of our diet, we can just eat whatever we want. If we've already hit our nutrient needs, there's more to food than what it does for us physically. Because a beer at the pub is not about the beer. It's about the social aspect. It's taking that sip of beer and being with people that you enjoy spending time with. That is fantastic for your social and mental health. And if you've already hit all of your nutrient targets for the day, enjoy the beer, enjoy the cake, enjoy whatever. Everything in moderation. That can be a bit of a fluffy phrase, but to me what it means is exactly what I just spoke about. 80% of your diet should be nutrient dense whole foods. Single ingredient food items that have a lot of nutrients. Plenty of fruits and vegetables, plenty of whole grains, plenty of fiber, plenty of different colors and textures, all food groups. And then 10 to 20% of your nutrition, if you want to, that's the key phrase, if you want to eat some funner stuff, ice cream, chocolate, chips, snacky, junk foods, do it. Junk food isn't inherently harmful. The issue arises when junk food displaces healthy food. So junk food in and of itself isn't extremely harmful. It's barely harmful. Like we're talking small effects here. When it becomes harmful is when junk food displaces nutrient-dense food. So when you're not consuming enough nutrient-dense food because you're consuming junk food, that's when it becomes harmful. The consumption of junk food itself, that's not the thing causing the issues. It's the overconsumption of junk food that then displaces nutrient-dense foods in our diet. That's what's causing the issue. So my big approach to nutrition as a whole is making sure that we're consuming enough of the good stuff, 80 to 90% of our diet from nutrient-dense, single ingredient, whole foods. And if we want to sprinkle in some fun stuff on top after we've hit our nutrient targets, there's no issue with that. And as I said, there's more to food than what it offers physically. The mental and social benefits, they matter as well. I've been speaking long enough about general nutrition. The other aspect of this podcast, I'm not going to go into programming today. I'm just going to keep it nutrition based. But the other thing that I'm really passionate about is performance nutrition, specifically for women. The reason I am very passionate about that is because I've worked with some clients who were in a very bad place when it comes to their nutrition mindset and the way they were fueling themselves compared to the amount of training that they were doing. And truth be told, performance nutrition, it is not easy, but it is simple. And the understanding of what matters for performance nutrition, we've got it backwards. The state of the industry as it is, I guess the whole influencerization of social media, where we have people with a bunch of discount codes, that has created this big focus and it's flipped the priorities on its head. So things like supplements, ice baths, saunas, recovery boots, they're the things marketed as what you need for performance and recovery. But they're the sprinkles on top. They're not even the icing, they're the sprinkles. When it comes to performance nutrition, what we have to understand is the order of importance. And credit to Dr. Eric Helms in this regard. I'm trying to forget who he collaborated on with this. He has something called the muscle and strength pyramids for training and nutrition. I think he was the first one to sort of put this into a pyramid, and it is essentially the base of the pyramid. That's the most important stuff. As you go up, that's the least important stuff. And at the even underneath the pyramid is behavior and lifestyle. So making sure that your behaviors and lifestyle overall support your performance. That's the big core. So behaviors and lifestyle being your stress management, your sleep, your social health, your mental health, the behaviors and lifestyle, the behaviors that you do every day and the lifestyle that you have somewhat curated needs to be supportive of what you're trying to do with your performance. That's the big rock first. But when we look at the pyramid itself, the number one thing on the base of that pyramid is calories. I don't give a flying shit how perfectly you time your pre-workout carbohydrates. If you don't consume enough calories and you're in a calorie deficit, you won't perform at your best. The number one thing that is important for performance is consuming enough calories. Avoiding a calorie deficit. There is a concept in the sports nutrition realm called energy availability. It's essentially the amount of energy you have left or available after you account for the energy you lose during exercise. So it's not just looking at, are you in a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus or a calorie maintenance? It's looking at how much energy do you have available per kilo of fat-free tissue. So essentially, after we account for the energy we burn during exercise, are you eating enough so your body has what it needs just to live? Because that's a big part of the equation when it comes to performance nutrition. If we don't give our body enough nutrients or enough calories for the most part, it may be able to grind through a session in the gym, but the reason you feel so shit in the other 23 hours of the day, you sleep poorly, your energy's rock bottom, you disturb your menstrual cycle, is because you're not eating enough calories and you don't have enough energy available to recover and to do the normal bodily processes that your body should be doing. So the number one priority when it comes to performance nutrition, eating enough calories. Whether those calories come from junk food or healthy food, we just need enough calories. And the biggest thing that I do with all of my performance athletes that improves their performance is gets them to eat less clean. So moving them away from this feeling of needing to eat clean all the time and explaining the importance of just eating enough calories. And it's okay to have some not clean food. If it means it helps you hit your overall calorie needs, that's going to be a performance boost, whether it's clean or not. And going back to what I just spoke about, we need to eat enough of the good stuff, not avoid the bad stuff. So if we eat enough of the good stuff and we have a calorie gap where we're still in a calorie deficit, sometimes we can't achieve our calorie needs with all clean foods because they're so damn filling. So with athletes in particular, or with people who are performance minded, we eat a lot of whole foods, a lot of nutrient dense foods, but that might only take them to 2,200 calories for the day and they're stuffed, they're super full. So we sprinkle in some crumpets and honey, we sprinkle in some bagels, we sprinkle in some Gatorade, some maple syrup, LCM bars, some juice. We sprinkle in some more processed, less filling foods, less clean foods on top to help them hit their calorie needs. Because as a performance athlete, your number one focus is making sure that you're eating enough calories. Number one focus. Number one focus. Are you eating enough calories? And in my experience, the most common thing is that particularly women who I work with predominantly, most of them are 500 calories away from performing better. It's as simple as that. 500 calories away from performing better. So, number one priority for performance nutrition, eating enough calories. That's our base of the pyramid. The next level is macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, and fiber, if you consider that a macronutrient. So eating enough protein for athlete or athletic individuals or performance-minded individuals, 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day is a good range. And protein mainly is going to be important for muscle growth and repair. Then we look at fats. We can look at fats a couple of different ways. Again, performance-minded individuals, we can consume 20 to 30% of our calories from fats, or a range that I like to use is 0.5 to 1 gram of fat per kilo of body weight per day. Or we can do 20 to 30% of total daily calorie intake. And then the most important performance macronutrient is carbohydrates. Every single woman that I have taken on board as a client, we have jacked their carbohydrates through the roof, and it makes a world of difference. A world of difference. So what I do personally, I set protein targets, I set fat targets given those ranges that I just spoke about, and then I fill the rest of their calories with carbohydrates. And then fiber will sit anywhere between 13 to 18 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed, just to make sure that we are digesting our food properly and all the other benefits that fiber offers as well. So on a macronutrient level, we have our protein and fat targets, which I set with the ranges that I discussed about. Protein at 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo per day. Fats at 0.5 to 1 gram per kilo per day, or 20 to 30% of total calories. These are just guides as well. You don't need to be hyper specific with them. And then I fill the rest of their calories with carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are the performance fuel. We use carbohydrates for high intensity activity. If you aren't consuming enough carbohydrates, you won't be able to train or perform as hard or for as long. And then fiber, depending on the individual, we set it anywhere from 12 to 13 grams all the way up to 18 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories. These are rough ranges and they're relatively wide ranges, because that's the truth. It depends on the person sitting in front of me. I might put fiber higher for someone who needs help with digestion. I might also put it lower for someone who's struggling to digest all their food. It really depends. It's learning to adapt depending on the situation that I'm seeing in front of me. So we've got the base, calories. We've got the next level, which is macronutrients. And then we have the next level, which is micronutrients. So making sure we're consuming enough micronutrients, enough vitamins and minerals, enough essential vitamins and minerals, but also the non-essential stuff as well. When we talk about non-essential nutrients, we're talking about things usually, the most common one is going to be phytonutrients. So phyto meaning plant, I think. I'm going to fact check myself on that. Phyto, if this decides to load, not going to load. Anyway, phyto means plant. Bang on. So phytonutrients, plant nutrients. When we consume plants, we get macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats. We also get micronutrients, so essential vitamins and minerals, but we also get non-essential micronutrients as well, which are usually phytonutrients. So they are non-essential nutrients that still can provide a benefit. So there's more reasons to eat food than just calories and macronutrients. We have essential and non-essential micronutrients as well. And non-essential compounds. Just because something's not a micronutrient doesn't mean that it's not beneficial for our body. Besides the point. So we have calories, we have macronutrients, we have micronutrients, and making sure we're consuming a wide variety of foods, all food groups, plenty of different colors, plenty of different textures, plenty of different flavors, because they, the colors, texture, flavor, food group, all those things usually point towards certain nutrients. Certain colors of foods, usually foods are certain colors because of the nutrients in that food. For example, darker meats are going to have more iron, more B vitamins. Different colors of fruits and vegetables are going to have different phytonutrients or different nutrients in general. All that sort of stuff. So we've got calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, and then we have meal timing or nutrient timing. So are we hitting our daily protein targets? Yes. How can we split that up to get the extra 5%? Are we having enough carbohydrates and calories on a daily basis? How can we split those carbohydrates up to better influence performance? So it might be allocating more of those carbohydrates pre and post workout as opposed to spreading them evenly across the course of the day. Same thing with fats. We might try and look at how do we remove fats from pre-workout nutrition so we can get digestion happening really fast. And then how can we utilize fats at other times in the day to slow down nutrition or slow down digestion? So we've got calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, meal timing, and then final one on top, supplements. A supplement supplements things. It adds to other things. It doesn't form the base, it adds to things. Supplements are the last consideration, although sometimes they can come in earlier. So if you're struggling to hit one of your macronutrients, either protein or carbs are probably the most common, that's where supplements might come in to help you hit your macronutrient targets. We also might introduce supplements earlier when it's things like creatine or caffeine, just because they are very cheap and very easy to use and beneficial. But supplements are the icing on top, or not even the icing, like I said, they're the sprinkles. It's making sure we're looking after the base of that pyramid first, calories, macronutrients, micronutrients, meal timing, and then if we see gaps that we can fill with supplements or we can further enhance performance by adding in specific supplements, then we look to do that as well. But from a performance nutrition standpoint, that's the too long didn't read version of what are our priorities, our order of importance when it comes to performance nutrition. That's what it is. Energy availability is going to be something that I'm going to dive into in a more in-depth episode, and going over essentially energy availability is the amount of energy you have per kilo of fat-free mass. So fat-free mass is everything on your body that isn't fat tissue. So how much energy do you have available per kilo of fat-free mass? Because our fat-free mass is usually organs or muscle that is metabolically active and requires energy to operate at its full speed or full potential. So if we don't have enough energy per kilo of fat-free mass, things start to shut down. And usually, particularly for women, the things that start to shut down are menstrual cycles. So hormonally, you start to turn the dimmer switch down and things start to shut off. And that's the conversation of energy availability is very warranted when we're talking about the menstrual cycle. I've now had over half a dozen women who I've worked with who have regained their menstrual cycle while still training a lot, just because we fix their energy availability. We bring up their total calories and their total energy input and make it exceed their calorie output so their body has enough energy available per kilo of fat-free mass to keep all the lights on and to avoid that dimmer switch coming down and turning things off or slowing things down, like the menstrual cycle or like bone repair, bone turnover. When we fall into a state of low energy availability where we're underfueling ourselves, we essentially go into low power mode, where the things deemed as non-essential start to get switched off. So we start to see hormonal systems get turned down. Reproductive systems, we can say goodbye. They're not deemed as essential. Digestion starts to go astray. Sleep starts to go astray because your body's in a stressed out state. You can't sleep. You've got to go and sort out all this stress. So energy availability and low energy availability is directly tied to not consuming enough calories in relation to how much exercise you're doing, which is again why we focus on the base of the pyramid first, calories. I cannot count, or I cannot express my frustration when I have women come to me who say they don't have a menstrual cycle or they lost their menstrual cycle and they were told by other coaches to consume more fruit and veg or more seeds or more functional foods or all this sort of crap, but they're not eating enough calories in relation to their training volume. It is so important that we as coaches understand for performance nutrition, the biggest consideration is is your client consuming enough calories in relation to the exercise that they're doing? If they're not, fix it by any means possible. If it means them having 2 liters of orange juice a day, do that. Because until you fix how many calories they're consuming on a daily basis, they will not improve. Not just their performance, but their overall health, their energy, their menstrual cycle, all this sort of stuff. Okay? So I have spoken enough about both general and performance nutrition. that I think I'm going to call it there for this podcast because I'm touching on an hour long. But I hope I've driven home the point of what I want this podcast to be. I want it to cut through the bullshit and hopefully address things on a somewhat basic to understand level. But I still want to touch on complex topics that I think I understand, but hopefully make them simple and digestible. So send me a message, comment, let me know if this was helpful, if you enjoyed this, if there's any topics you specifically want me to touch on. I will always be having coffee during these. I am a caffeine addict. I love caffeine. Don't take it away from me. Tangent, but anyway. If you have any questions, any feedback, any comments, leave them below. Message me on Instagram. That's probably where you'll get the quickest replies. But yeah, this has been fun. I've loved being able to go on long tangents of frustration and passion and hopefully give you an idea of what to expect in the years to come with this podcast. I think I'm going to end it there. Hopefully, I'm going to stick to one of these every single week. If I don't, apologies, but I'm going to hold myself to doing one of these a week, either by myself with a solo episode or with guests. So any feedback is highly appreciated, good or bad. I'll speak to you soon. Thanks heaps for tuning in to episode number 1 of, again, what I think is going to be called the Coastal Performance Nutrition Podcast. Speak soon.